Welcome to the new Overlords Podcast, a video game show where I'm joined every week by architect, artificer, and digital carpenter, my co-host Sema. Hello there, Sema.
I am a digital carpenter. That's true.
This week you are. We're certainly going to talk about that, aren't we?
Yep. How are you doing this week?
I'm doing great. You know, I found out you're not only those things, but you are an associate professor at Emory University, an adjunct professor at University of Pittsburgh, and you specialized in immunology, don't you?
That's so totally me.
Oh, wait. It's Dr. Sema Lakdawala, who spells her name wrong, as we determined. Seema. I was listening to NPR on Science Friday, and they do like a daily Science Friday now. Every day is Science Friday. It was on January 12th edition. I was listening to it last week. And Dr. Sema Lakdawala came on and was very, very cool and talked about immunology and the bird flu, I think was mostly what she was talking about. But
interesting.
They kept saying, like the host kept saying, so Sema, tell us more about blah, blah, blah. And I was like, catch me every time.
I sounded so much more educated than I usually do.
Well, on bird flu.
I'm going to start a Kickstarter to fund to go back to school and get my microbiology PhD.
I bet if you asked Dr. Sema about Tiny Glade, she wouldn't have known what was going on at all. So,
because she has a life.
Speaking of people that don't have lives, let's talk about the video game news.
Good news, everyone.
They have very rich lives. Some of it is virtual,
Right.
Some of it is real.
But it's all very rich.
One person who has a rich video game life is Raf Koster. And if you don't know who that name is, you got to go way back to where I got started with MMOs, one of the first places that I got deep into MMO and the MMO genre, which is Ultima Online back in the 90s. So Raf Koster was one of the game creators back then. He has been floating around doing side projects since then, and for the past few years has been working on a new MMO called Stars Reach. And it was brought to my attention. I saw it. I read up on it a little bit, and then it was re-raised to me by Stask earlier this week. And in looking at it, I also came across a little bit of news about it. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that news. The key thing that they seem to be running into with this is it's hard to make an MMO.
Right.
They've made an MMO, or they've started development on an MMO, and they seem to have gotten pretty far, and people are playtesting it apparently. They also reportedly have investors, but either the investors or something has changed in that they weren't going to have any sort of crowdfunding. They weren't going to need to do a Kickstarter. They sort of had this all under control, and they've gone back on that recently. So now there is a Kickstarter. They are doing a Kickstarter, and the speculation is that the investors are wanting some sort of confirmation on the fact that there is an audience out there. There is a demand for this before they put even more money into it. And because it takes a lot of money, and a lot of time to build an MMO. And this MMO goes a little bit further in a few different directions. It does a lot in destructible, modifiable worlds and environments where you're sort of carving out the actual planet itself. We'll have to see how that works out. There's always challenges in doing that when you sort of turn players loose. And in fact, Raf learned this back in the day in Ultima Online. There's articles you can read up at the time where in beta, they had these systems in place that were very dynamic. It was, you had to have so many animals, and different animals in different areas would have other animals that would spawn once they sort of congregated in an area, and it was all very sort of dynamic and reactive. Well, then they turned players loose, and players just murdered every single animal, and then nothing would spawn. Because that's what players do. Now, you watching this trailer, it's very cool what's happening in this sort of what will you make of the world? But I can tell you, there are those players that just want to watch the world burn. They're gonna
Right.
dig holes completely through the planet down to the core. They're going to dig out from under other people's bases. They're going to just tear up the environment because they need some resources real quick. So I don't know how they're going to prevent it from just sort of like becoming a carved up, hollowed out mess of an asteroid.
Also, and what's the TTP on it?
TTP? I miss.
Oh, you know what that is.
Oh, time to penis.
Yes.
Because if you give players the ability to build on your now they mostly show building they mostly show like carving away parts of the planet and then building buildings. I don't see them like build like terraforming earthenworks where you're like building up, but that immediately because people just build a big column and then they put balls on it and you're done. That happens instantly. Yeah, I don't know. It looks really cool. It's got a little bit of a sci-fi vibe to it. The dynamic environments and the ability to modify the environment sounds really cool. That I'm all in for that. The idea that they need to go to Kickstarter because the business environment is also challenging in addition to the technical environment of building an MMO. That's just tough. That's concerning on their part. It's tough to understand that this is where video games are at these days. Well, I guess they really kind of always have been, but it's much easier to start a project these days. Whereas in the old days, you didn't really even get the project started if there wasn't a market and funding. Whereas now you can get together with people, you can get some fans, you can ask them for money. That's not what they did here, but you can. And that potentially creates a troublesome environment where a lot of things get started and not many get finished, or people get excited because it got started and never finish it. And you get projects that last a decade and cost $800 million and still aren't even close to being finished and that kind of thing going on. So what was your take? Did you have any take? I mean, we were chatting a little bit in the pre-show.
I feel like my take is, yes, it's very hard to build an MMO and to fund an MMO. And that is a whole career in itself, understanding how MMOs can be successful or not be successful. So I feel like I don't know if this was necessary, and I don't know if it's a bad sign. I just know it's a thing. It's happening.
Right.
And I hope whatever it is, it works for them.
Yes. Kickstarter is also an interesting thing. And I've gone back and forth in my head, and you and I were talking about it a little bit. Is it a good thing, a bad thing? Is it useful? Is it precarious, both for the Kickstartee and the Kickstarter?
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I would say if you are thinking about contributing to a Kickstarter, I would say the same thing if you're thinking about gambling. Just only put money against it that you can afford to lose. Do not expect something in return.
Right.
It's a donation. Like they may say you'll have alpha access or you'll this or that or the other thing. And that all may be true, but don't do it for that.
Right.
Do it as a donation.
Right. Because a lot of games fail. Most games that get started never get completed. So just be aware. Yeah. That's a really good bit of advice. It's interesting to think about a Kickstarter in terms of it. The thing I like about it. We're not going to do a Kickstarter for our game as an example, but the thing I like about it does give you a data point. It lets you know if people are interested and how much, what sort of like the magnitude is that they're interested. It's also a communication tool. It serves other purposes, a whole bunch of purposes beyond the money. But it is a data point. And boy, I would love to have a data point because I have none.
Yeah.
So if I had one, I would extrapolate the hell out of that thing and then we would know, as I said.
You would know the wrong thing.
We have 0 confirmed users now. We could do a Kickstarter and have 5 confirmed users, and then I can extrapolate from that and say, well, by this time next year, we'll have 1 billion.
Right.
Because if in one day we got 5, and we expect that to double every day. It's clear that if everyone on the planet buys our game twice, then we will be successful. Okay, so that's that. We also got some news that Star Wars The Old Republic has got a patch coming out on Friday, and we did get some notes up about that. What did you do? Oh, tell us about bad luck protection, which won't apply to
Yeah,
me.
so yeah, most of the things are bug fixes with missions and various things. But they did have a little note that they had added bad luck protection for the most recent lair boss, and specifically for the schematics that lair boss is dropping. So basically, it's meant to protect you from never ever getting a drop.
Yes.
And the way it's implemented is very similar. I mean, not similar, simple, in that if you don't get it within 12 tries, then you will get it.
Right.
Still, it's a lot of RNG, right? Because there's a bunch of different varieties of it, and it might not be the variety you want. If you're doing this fight for the schematics, you still could do it, 100 times.
Right.
But
Because there's 7 or 8 different possible schematics. You might be looking for one of them.
And 12 times, by the way, is for story mode. It's 7 times for veteran,
Right.
which they've always said that it would drop more often in veteran.
Yep. And we've had people getting them. At least 1 out of 8 people seems to get them every single time we kill that boss, and usually more. So it's not that rare of an occurrence. But if you're having really bad luck, then
I just like that they mentioned it and then they explained exactly how they're doing it. I like that.
I think bad luck protection is great, and I would expect why wouldn't everyone always do it?
Right.
I mean, there's a little bit of extra work, but it's not even a lot of extra work. I mean, you're tracking all of these things anyway. Typically, we're going to be I was saying in the pre-show, I'm going to be doing a lot of work tonight, even on a subsystem in our game instance, to be tracking everything that kind of happens. And since we're tracking anyway, then we could just use that information to do things like bad luck protection. We don't have much RNG or any RNG in our, well, not in terms of things that matter to the player. There's RNG like where a weed will spawn.
Right.
But yeah, if we do get into a situation where we're like popping up little treasures, which is a potential wall of crazy idea, I will make sure that there's bad luck protection added in, because it should be, because we should have it. The rest of the patch for Star Wars is coming out this Friday. Seems to all be, so this is a lettered patch, which means mostly bug fixes, and that's what it seems like. We're still eagerly awaiting 7.6.1, which is sort of a first quarter release, and then we're hoping, and I haven't heard anything, any direction on when the story might happen, or if things have loosened up with, I guess I could have looked that up. Does anyone know if the voice actors have been able to cut a deal for video games and be able to get back to work? I don't know.
I don't know either. Oh, look.
Because that would be a nice thing if they did, and then it would also mean that work could continue that on the voiced parts of the story that we're waiting for Star Wars.
So the Google's AI overview says it's still ongoing.
Okay. Thank you, Google. Also, in coming soon news, the things that we'll be looking at are mostly in the first half of February. Civ 7. That seems to be the thing that the people in my social backyard, my digital backyard, are most excited about. And then not long after, that's February 11th. February 14th is Assassin's Creed Shadow, and then February 18th is Avowed. And I think Ubisoft is just going to get overshadowed again and have lackluster sales, because those other two are much more highly anticipated, and it's a rough spot. So they're like they're a few days after Civ 7 and a few days before Avowed. Poor Ubisoft. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like Ubisoft, and I don't think it's fair to not like quote unquote Ubisoft, because I know a lot of people at Ubisoft now. We've interviewed some of them in our interview show. We know individuals in different divisions in different parts of Ubisoft, and they're all people, and they're different teams. And Forster is saying Assassin's Creed was pushed to March. Did they continue to push it? I just pulled this off of IGN today, but if they did, that's a good idea.
Right.
When is Assassin's? Ask that. Ask that of your fancy AI, Sema. March 20th. So it says March 20th. Okay. Take that all back. Ubisoft, you have a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. Good plan. Good idea. They were right to push it. So there we go. All right. That's enough for the game news. This podcast is brought to you by Garden and a Goat from Contemplation Games. We are a little bit behind on doing dev updates. If you jump in the Discord, you can get to that at gardenandagoat.com. You'll see a little bit more about what kind of development's been going on. We do have some visuals to show, but I'm kind of waiting because we might be doing some fun things on the social side. I'm just like a little sort of like upping our social media and communication game just a little bit in the next week or two. So I might save the post of the next animal reveal for that. This podcast is also brought to you by LA Acta Est, the gaming community that Sema and I are part of. And we'll put the shout out. AIE is looking for more people. If you hear what we do and the kind of things we talk about, there's a bunch of people like that in that gaming community playing a bunch of games, and you could jump in and have other people to play with, and it's really fun. It's a fun way to go about it. So
just to be clear, it's not like having a podcast all the time. Everybody gets to talk.
Yes.
And we do a lot of, it's very fun. We do a lot of pop culture talking and it's fun.
Or people that never jump in voice. You could just join and like have a group to join. Like we've got a group that's out there playing New World and wants to do some of the bigger raid at the end and could use a couple more people. We've got a handful of people that are in like Warcraft Rumble and could use a few more people playing that. And you could like never even be in the Discord, but have a place where you could look up, is there a little game team I could join? AIE-guild.org for that. Also, this podcast is brought to you by all of you, everybody watching, everybody listening, and everybody in the chat room right now who's helping out and giving us good information like Forrester just did about Assassin's Creed actual date and the lies I was telling. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody that supports the show in that way. No Kickstarter for this show. All the support just comes from you all out there and you all telling your friends to go watch the show. Go do that's everybody's mission for this week. Tell 2 people. Because then by this time next year, 1 billion listeners. Because that's how trends work. All right. Listen to this, Sema.
If you build it, he will come.
Man, that's creepy.
It is creepy. If you build it, he will come. People misquote that as if you build it, they will come. But it is...
If you build it, he will come.
That, of course, is from Field of Dreams.
I don't remember it being quite that creepy in the movie, though.
It is. So in that scene where he first hears it, he's walking through the cornfield. That's how it sounds. And the first 2 times it has like creepy music behind it. And then he's like freaking out. He's like, hey, did you guys hear that? They're like, no, we didn't hear nothing. He's like, what the hell is going on? So if you build it, he will come. Anyway, I was looking for building quotes. That's what you get. Building. We're going to talk about building. We're going to talk about building in games. And one game in particular will be the star of the discussion, but then we're going to broaden it and say building in games in general. Why is it fun? I would love to hear people's in the comments of the show what your favorite building games are, and jump in our Discord and show us the things that you've built, because that's kind of a big part of the fun, is showing what you've built to other people. So Sema, start with Tiny Glade, because this is like a new hot building game. And I think it boils the building genre almost into its purest form in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So tell me about it, and then I'll ask you a bunch of questions. I'll draw you on this.
And I don't think Tiny Glade is the only game that does that, but it does it just so well, and it's so beautiful. But anyway, getting to what it actually is, it's a casual building game that's powered by a procedurally generated set of building tools and other things that are procedurally generated. And you can modify what you build just by clicking and dragging things, or clicking on arrows and circles, and there's no combat, there's no gathering. It's just you pick a menu, you tool off the menu, and you kind of draw on your screen with it. Now you can bring your ideas to life, but also you have to learn the tools in order to learn the power of them, for sure. It will, when you put things on the screen, it will try to snap things to what's already there, but you can turn that off if you want complete, movement freedom. And the tools are very simple. They're very simple and very easy to learn, but I think there's a lot of depth here with the building. To start off, and this is kind of one thing that I think is super cool about this is to start off, there's like 5 different settings you could pick: summer, autumn, magic, old-timey, winter. But once you click on that to make a new build, it starts you off with a sample new build that is procedurally generated. And you can build on that, or you can just erase it and start your own thing. But one thing that's really cool about that little build that you start with is you can press undo and watch how it was put together and go all the way back to the beginning.
Interesting.
And even more useful is then you can press, redo and watch it all, getting built all the way. So
How big is that first little build that they give you then?
it's like usually one building or a building and a tower.
Okay.
But they do topographical changes too to show that. And what you're showing right now, you can see those little white things. Those are sheep, and they just show up from time to time. Occasionally, they sort of parachute in with like a little red and white striped umbrella type of parachute thing. There is also like a day-night cycle, but you can turn that, force it. You can log it to the time of day you want, which I did, so that I would have good light for when I was messing around.
Sure.
And then I forced it to night so I could see how the lighting that I had added looked, that's super cool because you can you can turn the sunlight down till it becomes dark and the lights pop on, and then you go all the way through the night, and then the dawn starts to happen, the shadows get longer, and then it's daytime. It's part of the great thing about this game is just the look is fantastic.
Yes.
It's created by a studio called Pounce Light, which is 2 people
Okay.
in a Swedish company. It runs on the Bevy game engine, which I had never heard of.
No, neither
plus
have I.
some of their own stuff, and it uses the Rust programming language.
Interesting.
So another thing they do, I think one of the reasons that they start you off with that little build when you create a new thing is because a blank canvas, in other words, a blank glade, can be like an intimidating thing. And since building is the main point of this game, if you start it up and then you just have mind lock and can't have any ideas, then how do you play the game, actually?
Sure.
So they have that, but then they also have like a daily theme that you can click on, and the daily themes come from all over the place. In fact, even other players can suggest a daily theme. And so, like, for instance, on Monday, the daily theme was Desert Castle. And then when you picked that, it started you off with a little sort of multi-layer castle in a more deserty kind of setting. And then you can think, oh, this would be really cool if I added these, or if I took that away, or if I said, oh, over here, I'll make a little away, to get your mind going.
Interesting.
Oh, another little thing I noticed, because I spent a few hours this week doing this, is sometimes a bird, you look at a sheep and it'll have a bird riding on its head, and then the bird will just fly off.
So
One
a lot
thing I
of
thought was-
attention to detail, it sounds like. A lot of like little clever
Yes.
things.
And I think one of the reasons that they're able to do this with 2 people is, first of all, it must be 2 geniuses, but also because it relies so much on the procedural generation. So like you like right now it's showing windows being put on this building, that what you're doing. There's a window tool, and you can select one of 2 or 3 or 4 different types of windows, but that's all you can choose. So when you put it down on the building, it goes into place, and if you move the mouse a little bit, it'll add that second window, which you can even leave it connected so you have a double window, or you could drag it over a little bit so that you have a separate window. But like the tool kind of makes some of those decisions for you. You can always change them.
Sure.
And then, a lot of what happens with the building is even though the building tool only allows you to build towers, houses, windows, and walls and fences, you those are just the building blocks. So like if you wanted to do a patio, for instance, you would take a house and then you would sink the roof down till there was no roof, and then you would sink the house down into the ground until it was just only the top of it was showing, and that would be your patio. So there's
Yeah, I see them doing that here in this video. That's interesting.
yeah, so like if you put like a house on top of another house and then you make the house on top just slightly bigger, then it will either give the house like legs or like buttresses, some way to make it so that it
Hmm.
can hold its own weight,
Interesting.
or like arches. It does work on the Steam Deck, but they are working on making it work better on the Steam Deck right now. And also they're thinking of doing some work on the for controller support. Like apparently you can use a controller, but it's easier to use mouse right now. I guess they're trying to make the controller a little bit more intuitive.
Yeah, that seems like it would be rough with a
Yeah,
controller.
so there's a ton of stuff on YouTube about this game, people playing it and people making not only the people that always make like the huge builds, but just people giving tips and tricks, and people like someone I watched a short one about how to make a fire pit in Tiny Glade, which is basically they started with a tower, got rid of the roof, sunk it into the ground, and then they put chimneys inside the fire pit, so the smoke that normally comes out of a chimney was now coming out of this fire pit. So just a lot of creative thinking going into making things. I could
Interesting.
totally see how you could spend hours playing this game. And the process is the game.
Right. Right.
Like if you were building this with Legos, you would at least have the Legos. You would have like if you buy a Lego set to build a medieval castle, at least at the end you'd have a medieval castle.
Yeah. Interesting. So I have questions. Let's talk for a second, because I did lay out a couple things about building games. Why are building games fun? So let's talk about that, and then let's get back to Tiny Glade and talk about how Tiny Glade sort of subverts some of that, or it has a little bit of that in its purest form, and we'll get to that. But one of the things that's fun about building in video games, I think, is it's just creative. It's fun. It's like building. Like anybody who's played with Legos know how fun it feels to go build with Legos. You're just like building. It's creative. You get to make a thing, and you get like that dopamine hit of I made a thing. Look at me. I made a thing. So that's cool. I really feel like, and we talk about this with video games here and there, different developers will talk about player agency. What better way to allow a player to feel like they have agency, like they have, the ability to make changes in the world, than to allow them to physically build in the world. So
Right.
I think that's a key element. And we'll talk about that in a couple games. Emotional investment. So this is where I don't know, we'll talk about it with Tiny Glade, but if I play an MMO, for example, and I build in that MMO, I feel like I have a lot more emotional investment and ownership of things going on there, that it's something I want to then keep and have and go back to and visit. And it seems like it would potentially make players stickier to your game if you give them the ability to build something in the game that they can take and have long term. Do you feel that? I mean, let's just pause on that one for just a second. Am I wrong in that that's a thing?
I don't think you're wrong at all. But I do think that there's different that people get their hit that you're talking about in different ways.
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't have to be that, but
right. And I don't know, when I first played this game, I played for about half an hour, and I was like, this is kind of tiring. I don't know how to do this. It's a little bit confusing. Things are doing different than what I expected, and what do I have at the end anyway? But then the first time I played for more than time than that, maybe an hour and a half or so, I noticed that when I came away from my computer, I felt better than when I started. Like I felt better.
So I've seen
So
headlines or maybe like social media posts saying this game is not a video game, it's therapy. So you were
yeah,
kind of feeling that?
yeah. And I don't know about therapy, but maybe it's akin to apps like the famous mindfulness app. I don't know, I forget what it's
Yeah.
called. Um, you just spend some time not thinking about whatever your problems are. Um,
There's no stress.
that
There's
you're
no
just quiet. You're in a quiet state. You're just with yourself. You're not, uh, doom scrolling. You're not. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I like some things in an MMO. Like I notice that I will do some things in an MMO that are less interesting than this.
over and over and over.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
in a way, you don't have anything in the MMO when you finish either in a very real way. So if I farm a rare mount or something and I do it every day until it drops, we'll not say how long it takes, then I just have one more mount.
Right.
It's not all that different from having nothing.
Right. But you still, I mean, you still have a thing. So
I do, and
there
I
is
could
that.
but it's like if you show your mount to people, they're like, "Oh, that's nice." You know,
Right.
"Grats."
Right.
The best one, the bestest you're gonna get is, "Oh, I'm so happy for you." It's not, it's not. I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question of what makes something fun.
I gotta mute this. The last point that I skipped over is the social aspects. It provides an opportunity to show things off, to do things and show it off. And I've been back in Valheim a little bit, and this is like a tiny build compared to some of the things I've done in Valheim in the past, and much more functional than artistic. But I had to start building in Valheim, and I built a thing. And now, getting back to that, how sticky does it make it? I I've done this before in the various survival games. A lot of the survival games have building. And I really kind of like don't want to, even when I'm kind of done playing the game, I don't want to stop. I don't want to be done because I I've got my house and like the carrots are growing and I don't want to lose that. I
And your
sort of like
bees are
do
happy.
yeah, the bees. This one set of bees was not happy for some reason. I had to learn what I was doing wrong. But yeah, so I think it does make it for me. It makes it very sticky. And the games that ever had like player housing or building, it was much stickier when I've invested time into something big, not just like having things, but building things and making things. And I put my creative
I
energy into
have
it.
I have kind of a counter to that, which is I've noticed when I sit down to play Tiny Glade, like say I've been playing for a while and I've made kind of a elaborate thing and the idea has grown in my mind and it's not turning out exactly the way I want. I've noticed that the next time I sit down to play Tiny Glade, I'm very willing to just go, no, start a new one.
Well, that's interesting, and I think that might be somewhat specific to Tiny Glade, and that sort of got me to a thesis about Tiny Glade. They've sort of like distilled it down into this purest thing because, to be clear and
Yeah,
be like, tell me, I'll ask you. There's no resource gathering, right?
right,
You
right.
have the tools and you just build whatever you want, infinite building. Or
You do not run out of stones or anything like that.
okay,
Yeah.
so there's no resource gathering. There's no function. It's not like the bigger your build is,
Right.
the
You can't make a working watermill or
right.
yeah.
I mean, you don't even have a player character in the world, right? I mean, I didn't even
Right.
think of that
That's right.
until
No.
we started
Right.
watching the.
And you can't even go inside the building.
Oh, so there's not even an interior.
Right. There's
Interesting.
not an interior. So one thing I thought about when I was messing around with lighting is like, can I put a light inside of a building so that it's shining outside the window? There probably is a way. I couldn't figure out a way to
Hmm.
do it. But I have but right now as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of another thing to try. But so yeah, it's yeah, you don't have to go into your building at night to sleep or anything like that.
So you don't need it, but you also don't have a use for it in that way.
And in
Um,
terms of sharing, I forgot to mention there is a screenshot function, and
it,
that is very deep. It's a camera, and you can change angles and you can change filters,
it looked like
and you
depth of
can,
field. I was noticing that. That was,
yeah.
that's
I did
clever. They
not.
should do that.
Yeah, I did not. I mean, so that would be your way of sharing. But even then, I would only think other Tiny Glade players would appreciate it, right?
For one, but and for
Yeah.
two, in an MMO or like in one of those survival games like an Ark, I build a base and other people around they can visit my base and take a look at what I did.
And you can
Maybe
share
nobody
your you
does
can sh
though.
but like in Arc, for instance, you could share the fact that you can do such and such in my place if you need it. I forget exactly, but like, you
Yes,
could,
because you
yeah.
share function as well.
Right, right.
Um, uh, so that's a little bit different. But the social aspect of just the fact that you could share it with somebody, that matters to me just in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was one of the reasons that I switched over to Valheim instead of Arc on the side over the course of the past couple of weeks because we had AIE players in Valheim. And I don't know
Right.
if like Fez has ever visited anything that I've done in Valheim, but it could.
Right.
And that makes a
Yes,
difference in my head for some
I
reason.
totally get that. It's like I like the outfit on my druid. It's not like I ever go showing people, but they could
But they
look at
could
it.
see it. And I could, yeah. And it's like it makes it more real because other people are like there and around. This and now I'm showing Enshrouded. Enshrouded has some really nice building. And this was a much more elaborate build that I did in Enshrouded. But getting back to Tiny Glade and those things not existing. There's no resources. So let's start there. So
You know
with
what else that means though, Max? No inventory.
okay, yeah, so no inventory. I mean now I'm hearing more and more how two people could build this game. It's still technical genius, but they're
Yeah.
using sort of like that geometry node ability to have the reactive building parts, but they don't have a player character. They don't have game systems. They don't have abilities. They don't have inventory, and they don't need to worry about that. That's great. That's good for them. They've been able to put all of this extra focus and refinement into a beautiful artistic
Right.
project.
Right.
Do you miss that though? Do you miss not having the building like the bits of friction because I kind of get into it. Like I'm like building in Valheim this week or building in Enshrouded and you got to like go out into the world and find these materials and that's part of the experience.
Right. I I don't know because I like you, I find that very compelling. Like I recently did a thing in WoW, which was a Secrets of Azeroth thing, which was a process that ultimately had hundreds of steps that you had to do to get this mount at the end. And I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. I didn't start at the beginning and think, oh, this is going to take too long. I hate this, blah, 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 and grumble all the way through. I was always like, okay, what? Good, I finished that. Now what's next? I don't know what's wrong with me, but I really enjoyed that.
But that's
Um,
a game. And that's why and I think that's good.
yeah,
I don't it doesn't confuse me because it's a journey. Um
right.
Now just the pure creative part is a journey as well, but so in
But I don't think in Tiny Glade I miss having to go out and not only go out and get the materials, but somehow keep track of them. And I don't miss being interrupted because I need one more stone.
yes. I don't know.
And then I
The
have to go out there, but I can't because I'm encumbered. So now I have to pick a box.
but those points of friction in some ways make it satisfying when you overcome them. So here's
Yeah,
here's my
yeah,
thesis for Tiny Glade. I haven't played Tiny Glade. We talked about it. I was like, oh, Sema's playing. I'll just let Sema play it. Um, if I play Tiny Glade, I would I would have fun with it. I think it would be interesting and creative. I would make a thing, and then not in a bad way, but I don't like almost how you're describing. I don't think I would feel much connection to it. Almost more like a sketchbook where you sketch something in the sketchbook and then you turn the page. You might go back and look at those things that you sketched
I
previously, but the fun of it is turning the page and making the next sketch.
I think that's not a bad analogy.
Yeah, as opposed to when I build in like a survival world, I don't want to like knock down what I've done. I want to like expand it. Or like in Valheim, you keep your first base and you go back to it and you connect them with portals because they have function and you invested resources in it. So it's much stickier in that way. Whereas with Tiny Glade, as you said, you might just come down and you might have been like in the middle of a build and you didn't invest anything in it besides the, clicking around, making the artistic thing. You didn't like go and farm up resources. You didn't go through that thing. You don't need it so
Well,
your chickens don't die.
absolutely. You invested your time, which ultimately is the same
Yes,
thing you invest in the other game.
right. But
Like,
it's if
I don't know that I completely buy that it's less sticky or more sticky.
okay. I mean that I think for me I would
Yeah,
guess it would be
I
less, but
yes, I
not
think
not
it's
necessarily for
different.
everybody.
Okay, I definitely think it's for different people because there's absolutely people who love their sketchbook
Hmm.
and that their sketchbook keeps them sane and they play in their sketchbook every day. That's not me and
Right.
it's not you, but I would argue that for them their sketchbook was very sticky. So
Yes.
that's why
Possibly. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, which leads me then to like one. Now this is, we talk about how much Tiny Glade sort of boils this down to its purest form. Uh, One of the things that I think, how pure of a form is it boiling it down to? How far away do you feel Tiny Glade is from a literal sketchbook or an art tool? Like a modeling tool like Blender or Procreate and why not just go there? And
So I think um, first of all, I don't think Tiny Glade is the only game like this. There's other games like Townscaper and I think which one called Summer House. You could almost argue that Dorf Romantic is kind of like it, in that Dorf Romantic has points of friction, but it's not gathering and all that stuff. Anyway, um, in terms of like in my world, when I would do Tiny Glade versus Procreate, would be you might conceivably use Tiny Glade to quickly rough out some ideas that you then want to do in Procreate. I could see that happening in much like your example of the sketchbook.
it's much faster, takes less learning to figure out how to
Right.
use the tool.
And then, well, with Procreate, then you wouldn't be limited to just five types of roofs, for instance.
Right.
You could make a roof shaped like a dinosaur if you wanted to.
Right.
Um, I also saw some like DMs using it to make like a picture of so that they can share with their players of what the village looks like or what the ravine looks like that they're coming into, which I think is
Clever.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, but
So
yeah, in terms of like why not Procreate? I would do Procreate first because I wanted to have a result. Like in this game, you don't really have a result. Like if I made something in Procreate, then I have a pattern I can use to put on a mug or fabric or something
it's
that I use it for, which you can't do that with this. I
yeah.
don't think.
It's a weird thing, and again, maybe it's just something that I feel from time to time. But I do get into when I get deep into building in certain games, I get to the point where I start to feel like, well, why don't I just open up Blender and make the thing I really want to make? If all I want to do is make, and I
Right.
do have some skills to do that, well,
Right.
then maybe I should just go make.
Right. And I thought that since the beginning of when we first started playing Ark, I felt like, well, if I'm going to spend all this time building in here, why don't I just go build it in Procreate?
Yeah. But the barrier to entry is much lower. The time to results, TTP, is much shorter. And that can be really satisfying. You could just sit
Right.
down for,
And so, like,
for 15 minutes, 20 minutes and have like a
when
nice little glade and houses
when
and
you
stuff.
show like the palette that's available in Tiny Glade, it's a lot of colors, but they all harmonize. When you sit down in front of
Yeah.
Procreate, it's easy to pick colors that don't harmonize.
Right.
You have way more freedom,
And I think
but then
that's
it's all you.
I think that's a valid concept too, is the cohesiveness of the visual cohesiveness gets you to a complete aesthetically pleasing result much quicker than anything else. It's other things I find fascinating about building in video games, and I've got other clips of where I've done it. Doesn't matter how, if you give the players the ability to build anything, they will. It's some subset of players I feel will take it and run. They
Right.
will push it to its limits. So like here's No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky has like these set prefab pieces, and you snap them together, and you kind of like make a building out of it. And you got a floor part and a wall part, and you snap them together, and you make a building. Players have found, and Hello Games hasn't like patched out because players have gone through the trouble of like being super creative with it. They found a way to what they call glitch building. Is if I overlap these, you're not supposed to be able to do that. But if you overlap these two pieces, you can get them to like overlap a little bit and like clip into each other and make weird shapes. So
Mhm.
you're not snapping them together, but so players will do that, and then they'll make the Eiffel Tower, and they'll make Rivendell, and they out of these like metal floor plates in
Right.
in the game. You give them like just an inch of opportunity for creativity, and players just seem to desire to go wild in any game.
So one of the links I put in the notes was to this person who had made a shipwrecked pirate ship from the houses and
Yeah, let me
walls
pull
that are
that up.
available.
It was like a little YouTube short, right?
Yeah, yeah. So same kind of a thing, or at least, yeah,
Just like
same kind of a
it's sort of like outside the bounds of what you should be able to do, and they've sort of found a way to get their vision created using the constraints of the tools that are available to make what they wanted to make.
Right.
It's just so weird to me how, not weird, I find it so fascinating and fun how players will just like spend all of this time doing this in a game that kind of has like they'll do it in Arc. They'll make it, the
Yeah.
Tower of Ornthak in Arc. And Arc is a game about fighting dinosaurs. What do you?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's supposed to be a building game, but if you give any kind of like building functionality, players will take it and run with it.
Right.
Some subset of
I
players
mean,
will take it and run
remember
with it.
what you built when we were playing Landmark.
Yeah, I mean, Landmark was a little bit of a building game, but yeah, because you could. And it's funny, if you take any building game and you type into YouTube, best builds or, amazing build in blah game, you'll get really weird, wild, fun things because of people have done that. And yeah, and I did.
Lot
I've
of
done
Lord
that.
of the Rings things.
Yeah, people, I did it. I did it
That's
back
what
in the
I'm-
day.
that- Yeah, I know. That's what I was
To
referring
scale,
to.
you had a little player character, and that one you had to like go out and mine the materials and stuff. It was early access kind of at the time. I don't even think it was called early access back then, but I had to like mine all these materials, and I made the Tower of Ornthak. I'm in this voxel building engine to scale to my
Right.
little character. You could like fly around. They gave you a lot of building tools and copy and paste tools, and because it was voxel building, you'd get like different sets of constraints. But yeah, I get a vision in my head. Wouldn't it be cool to see that in this game? Wouldn't it be cool to see? And people did it here. I saw it was a Tiny Glade build of the Tower of Ornthak, right? Which is one of the two towers. If people don't remember what that tower is, that's Saruman's tower in Lord of the Rings. Tiny Glade Tower of
And someone made Rivendell, and someone made Isengard. Yeah.
We're taking the hobbits to Isengard. But yeah, because why not? Hey, it's a cool thing. It's a graphical thing that you like. Why not build it and be the one to build it and show it off? And then I started thinking about other games where there's different kinds of building, and Starfield and shipbuilding came to mind. And same types of creativity. And now you're sort of pivoting on building a little bit. But in Starfield, I took a ton of time. I played for hours building my ships. You can go and search out the Starfield building videos and find people that have built copies of other starships from other universes, flying Transformer, Optimus Prime that flies around as a ship in Starfield. Very constrained in what's kind of like the tools you have available there, because you're like snapping on, they have like different manufacturers, but you're snapping on like a cockpit or a hab module. But then people found ways to like clip into things and overlap things and make really creative, interesting builds, and did, because why not? So yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic, just this idea of building in general. Now, you are a creator, you are an artist, and you are thinking about Tiny Glade as a sketchbook. Just to come back and circle back on that, how sticky do you think it will be for you?
I don't know. I don't know, because even though I felt the benefit of that quiet time,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really what I seek out in my life. I really want to create something, that will be lasting. So I don't know.
I mean, you
Yeah.
have skills. You have skills. Bro, I've got skills, bro. You've got skills in such that you can make, I mean, you're a maker in a lot of different ways, not just
Yeah.
in terms of art. And
So,
why not
yeah.
make?
So like, I feel like if Tiny Glade was stealing time away from that, no. But if it's feeding that, then yes. So I'd have to sort of explore that a little bit, because I do feel like sometimes I get overwhelmed and then I get into the state where I don't do anything. So I wonder if Tiny Glade turns out to be a tool for getting past that part of life, then yeah. Like, I don't feel like doing anything, so I'll just make a cottage right now.
Right. And yeah, exactly. I don't think there's anything wrong with wasting time also.
Right.
And in some ways that's a cleansing experience, a brain cleansing experience. Very sort of satisfying, and just not having to worry about the details of the real making in doing that. And I'm doing a lot of making right now with the game dev.
Right.
But I took a little bit of a break in the last week to do some of that building in Valheim. I had to like allow myself to not feel guilty doing that, because I'm like, oh, I should be doing blah, blah, blah. But I've been hitting the game dev hard, and all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. I mean, I've said that last week. I believe that that's true. So just a little bit of release and, goofing off and doing something else not only does relaxes you a little bit and gets your mind off things, but it also helps reset creativity to some degree as well, so that when I go back, I could like think about a different way to approach a problem and get into it and do something different that's better.
Yeah, I totally believe in that too. Sort of like you get into a state where your mind is not your friend. You
Yeah.
come back and look at the same thing later and you go, oh, of course, this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's interesting, but I think, like, I really like Valheim.
I do think there are a lot of people for whom this kind of game is very sticky. And I think because of that, I don't know. I think my prediction about Tiny Glade is going to be very big
Interesting.
in this arena. I'm not defining the arena because I don't know enough about it, but I just, from what I'm reading, people's responses to it and everything, I think it's going to be big. And there's some things that they could change, and they're already changing. Like, for instance, when you make a window, you can sometimes get, they call it clutter items, like a little bucket or a broom or a wagon. And they made it so that now once you make one of those things, you can move it it's not no longer hooked to the window. You can move it off to another spot. You can make duplicates of it. You can change the
Nice.
size and the orientation, everything. I think they're probably working on getting to a point where you could add those things wherever you wanted to, instead of having to start with a window.
They are early in their development cycle,
Yeah.
so
I think maybe even, I don't know if this is in their philosophy, but maybe being able to go inside a building, that would be big. There's no copy paste, for instance. And I don't know if they would want to go there, but it's just come up. A few people have said, I would really like to have a copy paste tool.
yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting to not have copy paste. Also, I don't know. I think it's very warranted for it to sort of be big. It's sort of like best in class for this kind of thing. I don't think. I wonder though if it will get much bigger than sort of it's like its big splash right now, and the players that have sort of like latched onto it, and it could, I mean,
Maybe,
it
yeah.
organically grow, but it is still what it is, and it's not like multiplayer, and you don't have like your friends in there. That would make it a little more sticky, and it is sort of like this sketchbook. There's no PvP. There's no skills. They're not. I don't know what they would need to start doing, but although they have done a few things that are clever, which is like the theme of the day kind of thing, and they could start
Right.
running contests, and they could make it more social, and they could. Well, you can't really visit somebody else's build. You're not really like having that opportunity
I
to.
feel like everybody has and can benefit from having that creative spot in them have a voice. And so I think that's where this could be really beneficial.
I think though, because it is in some ways limited by the style of what it is and what you're
Yeah.
doing, that it could very easily, very quickly be supplanted or augmented. And like it might not be the only thing, and probably doesn't need to be the only thing that people that want this go and do. And there might be the next big thing that does this in space or
Or maybe that's in their plan too. Like, well, not space, but like say underwater or a different
yeah,
kind of
right,
city or whatever.
exactly.
Like I know there's I forget the name of it, Disco Pika or something. There's a game for making like a cyberpunk city that's just a building game. So that there's a lot of stuff out there already.
Yeah. So I don't see it as sort of like, taking over the genre this in the same way that you wouldn't want to be limited to like if you're see if you have a sketchbook, you wouldn't want to be limited to only drawing little crenellated houses.
Right. And I saw well yeah, I mean the crenellations are optional, but yeah.
But
Um
but just whatever that style of house.
right. Right. So I did see some people saying, like they just wish there could be little people walking around.
Hmm.
And I do get that. And it kind of reminds me of when I played briefly Pal World. It gave me so much happiness to see your pals like just running around working on your base.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's a design tenet that says, no people.
Right.
Because yeah. Because I mean, you don't want to remake Animal Crossing, right? Like
Right.
necessarily, yeah.
But they've got the sheep. So that's nice.
They do have the sheep.
Got that going
And
for
there's
you.
no farming, and no way to like have crops, especially not crops that would grow. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if that's somewhere where they would want to go, or if that's not the direction. That would be like the wrong direction
Yeah.
for what they're after. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. Because there's not a need for the I mean, well, you could have crops as decoration, and I could see people wanting that, and that'd be
Yeah.
in keeping with the theme of the
Yeah.
game.
And
Um,
part of it too is like I've watched these really elaborate builds, and now that I've played it for a while, I know what goes into like making those steps and stuff. I'm like, I don't think I want to do all that.
so maybe more tools to, yeah, as you said, like copy and paste. Should would potentially help it out. Maybe other tools to speed up other parts so you can build more things. But or maybe it is what it is, and it can be good at being what it is, and that's good and fine.
I mean, free cell has existed since the
Right.
90s in pretty much the same state.
Yeah, why do we have to have this situation where unless games evolve to
Be like every other game.
everything,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
be the one game that rules them all? Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be. Minesweeper. I'm gonna get back to I'm gonna become a
Streaming.
Minesweeper streamer again. All right. Well, I think that is pretty good. I do love building in games, though. That's a big highlight when a game has building in it. But I still like the game part, which I think makes me not as enamored with
Right,
Tiny
right,
Glade. Artistically, I
right.
love it, and mechanically, I love it. But from the
Yeah.
game perspective, there's less of a game there than I would personally want.
Yeah,
But I
and
think it's cool.
and the people who spend hours in Tiny Glade maybe don't play games. Maybe this is
Right.
yeah.
True. Maybe it's not a game. It's more, yeah, it presses sort of like a different button than what gamers want.
Yeah.
Um,
It's fun though. Recommend.
Thumbs up, Tiny Glade, good job. Glad we got some view into it. Glad you checked it out for us, Sema. Glad you played it so I don't have to. But I may still want to. If I had it, I would load it and play it. And if it's on sale, I'll probably pick it up just to get in there. The art and the mechanical, the artistic design of it and the mechanics of it are spectacular in and of itself. And I would love to just experience it for that alone.
Right.
Whether or not I want to be building, big castles or towers or whatever. I've played around with a little bit of this kind of technology in, you could sort of get plugins to do some of this with geometry nodes in Blender when you're sort of like building out a scene. And it's fascinating. So it's really, really cool. Really good job. Good job. But what was you say the name of the company was? Let's give them one last shout out.
Pounce Light.
Pounce Light
Pounce
from
Light.
Sweden. Good job.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But I think that is it for us for today. We'll get a little bit back on track, get our show lengths under control, not go 2 hours. Let us know if you prefer it to be those hour and 45-minute shows that we were doing the last couple of weeks, or if you prefer it more sort of like on the hour, 45-minute to an hour scale, which is sort of what the target's supposed to be. But that is it for us for today. All the feed and subscribe links are on newoverlords.com and our videos on YouTube/newoverlords. Please come chat with us in our Discord and tell us whether you want it longer or shorter at newoverlords.com/Discord. You can also follow on all the social networks and we'll keep you up to date there too. And with that, we will talk to you soon.
Later, everyone.